Hey everyone, Rho here. Today we discuss Renegade Black Templars. How unbelievably it could just happen. General spoiler warning to begin, as today we will be discussing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe, as well as a specific warning for the Dawn of Fire novel Throne of Light by Guy Hayley. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself, without spoilers. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. When it comes to fanatically devoted warriors of the Imperium, the Black Templars chapter may just be top of the list. They most definitely give the Sisters of Battle a close run for their money. Renowned amongst the Adeptus Astartes, the Black Templars are one of the few exceptions to worship the Master of Mankind as a god. Their devotion to him is absolute. Since the days of the heresy itself, where the fabled Sigismund became anointed as the Emperor's champion, slaying all who stood before him, their faith has become ingrained within them. So with that said, you may be wondering how on earth they could ever turn renegade. Well, the problem is, it's not actually a matter of losing their faith, but instead, more so because of it. As so often has been the way since the Primarch Roboute Guilliman returned, as knowledge of his Primaris creations has spread, and his torchbearer fleets have crossed the stars, the reception hasn't always been good. In the early days of this massive lore shakeup, it really felt like a civil war amongst the Astartes could actually transpire. Such was the embedded discontent from the existing firstborn Marines, viewing these new reinforcements as nothing but a replacement. The loyal, steadfast Marines who had willingly given their lives in service and kept the Imperium standing for over 10,000 years. To them, what right did Guilliman have to replace what had been good enough for his father? However, as the lore continued to develop and more stories begun to come out, we have seen the Primaris become far more accepted amongst their kin. There were, and are still, stories of them having to prove their worth, but for the most part this is done. Indeed, the Primaris are now the superior number amongst the Astartes. But this brings us to the Black Templars. When their codex released several months ago, we got our first real glimpse into how their relationship with the Primaris began to unfold. Understandably, Guilliman and the powers that be deemed the Black Templars one of the biggest risks in terms of unveiling the Primaris. As probably the most fanatically religious chapter out there, their reaction was pretty much impossible to predict. And while it's not explicitly stated, let's be real here, if the Black Templars opposed the Primaris, that could have been a huge problem. The Templars are an incredibly large chapter, completely disregarding of Guilliman's own codex mandates. And so with this in mind, Guilliman personally sought out the High Marshal himself. Now hopefully we'll get this really covered in depth within a novel someday, because this would have been some fascinating reading. However, from what we know, Helbrecht was in two minds at the returned Primarch's arrival. As a living, breathing son of the Emperor, of course he felt the need to nigh on worship him. However, as a son of Dawn himself, he was all too aware of the fractured relationship between the brothers, the hostilities that ensued in the years of the Scouring. And so part of Helbrecht feared Guilliman would try to do what he previously failed at, to rein in the Sons of Dawn. However, as it turns out, the meeting went rather well. Helbrecht accepted the Primaris without question, understanding immediately the value that they represented. And so not only did he accept the technology into his own fleet, but he sent word to all Templar crusades across the Imperium to accept the Torchbearer fleets bearing the Primaris technology, by the Primarchs and his own decree. So you'd think there was no problem. The Primaris were accepted, and the Black Templars were not censured. However, that brings us to the events of the Dawn of Fire novel Throne of Light, by author Guy Hayley. Now within this story we find out that despite Helbrecht's pronouncement, not all Templar marshals are in agreement, and Guilliman still has fears that despite Helbrecht's acceptance, the rest of the Black Templars may not follow suit. And this is a particular problem, not because of the size of the Templars as a whole, but because of their faith, and what they represent. Because the Black Templars worship the Emperor as a god, and are undoubtedly the most famous chapter to do so, Guilliman views them as an important link between his Astartes and the Adeptus Ministorum, the ecclesiarchy or church for any newer fans. Guilliman's relationship with the ecclesiarchy is tenuous at the best of times, suspicious of the politics and power they wield, and personally being against the worship of his father as a god. However, because the ecclesiarchy is so powerful, Guilliman needs to keep them on side, and having the Black Templars refuse the Primaris could cause a lot of problems in that regard, as any chapter who refuses the gift of the Primaris is in effect defying the Lord Commander himself, and thus would face the consequences. Now within Throne of Light we see that one particular crusade, despite appearing to have accepted the Primaris, in reality has not. The Torchbearer fleet did arrive, the Marshal of the Crusade did send his confirmation, however since then, nothing. And so Guilliman dispatches a mission to investigate. Now through the course of the mission it's unveiled that the Torchbearer fleet did arrive, and indeed the Marshal did accept. However, the men of the Crusade did not. Viewing the Primaris as nothing more than a heresy, the Black Templars of this crusade betrayed their Marshal, slaying him. They destroyed the Torchbearer fleet bearing their Primaris reinforcements, including the Emperor's own custodian, who led the fleet. And it's really worth reaffirming here, as far as the Black Templars are concerned, they did nothing wrong. They are in the right. Such is their fanaticism to the Emperor. They have no doubt whatsoever that everything they do is righteous, that they do in his name. Belisarius Cawl is a heretic for creating the Primaris. Guilliman himself is an unbeliever. Helbrecht is misguided, and even the custodian himself betrayed the Emperor by siding with the Primaris. Such is the Templars' faith, they are convinced of their own actions. To them, they are loyal to the Emperor and simply continue their duty. They don't forsake their vows and go on a crusade of vengeance against the worlds of the Imperium. They've simply rejected the Primaris and continued with their devotion, slaying the enemies of mankind, protecting world after world. And this is the dilemma that Guilliman faces. The simple fact is that yes, High Marshal Helbrecht may lead the Black Templars chapter, but in reality, so vast and dispersed are the Crusades that they are essentially autonomous and largely their own masters. So devout and dedicated to their cause are they, that they could even kill one of the Emperor's own custodians and view him as the heretic. I mean, honestly, it's so crazy it makes me want to start a Force of the Templars myself just for that. How could you not admire that devotion? They will brook no argument or dispute in what they believe. Even their own High Marshal, the master of their chapter, just can't tell them otherwise. He can issue his orders, but if their faith pulls them in a different direction, then that's the way they are going to go. And here there is no debate about it. This was technically a renegade Black Templar crusade. They may have believed that they were in the right, continued to defend the Imperium of Man, but they rejected the Primaris, and they destroyed loyal servants of the Primarch. Now this was just one crusade who was on its last legs. However, there are countless crusades across the stars. In reality, most likely more than Helbrecht himself knows. Some within the relative stability of Imperium Sanctus, others lost amid the darkness of Imperium Nihilus. The simple truth is, not Helbrecht, not Guilliman, not anyone truly knows just what all the Crusades are doing. And to make the assumption that this was the only enclave of Templars that felt this way, that viewed the Primaris as a heresy against the Emperor, well, that could very well be a big mistake. And so really that only opens the possibility that there could very well be renegade Templar crusades somewhere within the galaxy. But as always, what do you think? Were the Black Templars in the wrong to reject Guilliman's Primaris? Or did they simply go too far? If revealed that there were more Crusades who had rejected the Primaris, just what would be Guilliman's actions? Would he wipe out these Crusades and risk the wrath of the Ecclesiarchy? Or would he instead turn to Helbrecht and beseech him to deal with the matter? If Guilliman did use force of arms against one of these Crusades, how do you think the Ecclesiarchy would react? Would they understand Guilliman's actions, or would they see this as a heresy, a destruction of loyal servants of the God Emperor? Could maybe the renegade Black Templars prove to be the undoing of Guilliman? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. If you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.